yoga of work. It's a very important topic because most times, people think that spirituality is somehow opposed to my work and that the two are actually not in alignment with each other. And we just don't know how to actually balance our work and our spirituality. Sometimes we put them in two separate boxes and we try to keep them as far apart as we possibly can. Sometimes we think that work is indeed worship, right? That, especially in India, we talked about this last time. You ask somebody, have you read the Bhagavad Gita? And they'll say, yes, yes, yes. I know the Bhagavad Gita. It just says that just do your work. So if you take a moment to think about it, just doing our work would just make us workaholics. It would not necessarily lead to a sense of awakening. So while it is true that we must do our work, but at the same time, how that work is done and why that work is done is actually as important as the work being done. So we're in this session, what we're exploring is the motivation behind work. What is the highest motivation? Because most of the times, what is our motivation for work? It is the salary or the wage that we get. And as a case in point, if tomorrow our boss stops to give us our salary, we are probably not going to want to go back to work, right? So our motivation right now is that. And so a lot of times people, especially when they get to a certain point and they think they have enough money, they just think, okay, now I don't need to do my work anymore. I can just retire. And there's a new sense that, okay, you should, retire if you can retire at 30, you know. But the reality is that our relationship with work is actually much more complex because it is described. I was just reading the other day that even at the age of 60, when people try to retire, there's a high percentage, and Loka might be one of those people as well. He might be joining that statistic that after giving up work, within I think 6 months to a year, people actually go right back into the workforce. So our relationship with work is actually quite interesting. It seems like it's where we get our core identity from, but at the same time, we have a struggle how to keep our work from becoming a chore. Like I remember when our son joined his company, his first job, there was so much of excitement and it was like, oh my god, I get to do this and I get to do that. And here was Loka on the other end of the spectrum where he was like, I've been doing this programming for like 30 plus years, I'm done with this. So our relationship with work is kind of interesting, and the Bhagavad Gita really really goes deep into it, and it says that actually there is a whole art of doing our work in a way that can actually truly fulfill us and ultimately lead to our self awakening. So would you like to add
Yeah,
something?
let
Or
me start.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, work is such an integral part of ourselves that without connecting work with our higher spiritual purpose, uh, life becomes very dissatisfying because we spend a lot of time doing work, and if that is not channeled properly, then it leads to a lack of purpose and this great divide. So Krishna is trying to bridge that divide between work and spirituality, and that's what he's recommending to Arjuna. Arjuna has the most difficult work or duty at hand, which is to fight. And this is not just sitting on a chair and typing away, but this is like fighting for life. He can be killed in that kind of work. So if Arjuna can convert that kind of work into yoga, so can everybody. And we'll actually benefit a lot by doing that. The effect will be seen in all different aspects of our life. And no matter what we do, if we can learn this art of yoga of work, then we'll be happy and satisfied in all different parts of our life. So let me jump into the presentation. So this is just going back a couple of slides back, just to give the context. Krishna is saying that he's giving another motivation for work is working for self-purification. And
actually, I was just thinking that just this morning when I had a conversation with Manjari, it was sort of on similar lines that sometimes, there is a sense that spirituality means that I just retire into the Himalayas and I quit my work. But actually, as we can see here, that work should never be given up capriciously, right? And that kind of premature renunciation of work can actually create a lot of chaos in society, as well as it does not lead to the ultimate purification of the heart. So let's continue.
Yeah, Krishna is pointing out that we have two problems in this. Everybody who is in this material world, they have an impure propensity for lording it over material nature. We want to control material nature. We want to manipulate material nature. We want to manipulate others to our benefit. Everybody has that, no matter how much they claim that they don't have it, but everybody has it. And the desire for sense gratification. So these propensities cannot be just cleaned, purified without proper practice and mindset. So this is the art of work. So this is where we left. The yoga of work has three main components. And if we incorporate that into our work, then we'll be satisfied and happy, which is the law of dharma, law of detachment, and law of service. And ironically, all three of them are kind of missing in today's world, where people are working just for making more and more money, or rising up the corporate ladder, becoming more powerful, more famous. All the goals that we strive for in our work are quite the opposite of what Krishna is proposing. And ironically, if we follow these, then we'll actually be able to achieve much more than following the traditional path. So the first one is the law of dharma. What is the law of dharma?
So it's a very interesting concept. One of my favorite concepts is the idea of dharma. It's a word that has actually now found its way in the English dictionary. But the word dharma really means that which sustains us. So we all have a certain nature, and that nature is what sustains every person. So, for example, what is the nature of sugar? The nature of sugar is sweetness. The nature of water is liquidity. And if you take that nature away from that object, then that object will no longer be that. So, for example, if you remove liquidity from water, then water is no longer water, it becomes ice. So, in the same way, we also have two kinds of natures or two kinds of dharmas. One is our dharma or nature pertaining to the body, and the other is. Do you want to continue?
Yeah, the other is our nature. Duties pertaining to the soul, because the soul has an inherent nature, and when something is not functioning according to its inherent nature, then we go out of balance. We only know that, right? For example, if you are an early riser, or if you are a late nighter, and then if you have to ask to rise early every morning, then it will be very hard. You will be kind of dysfunctional throughout the day. So when we work against our nature, then we are not most productive. So similarly, the soul has a certain nature, and in our spiritual books, the nature of the soul is described, and what the soul needs is also described, the needs of the soul. So those duties which pertain to the needs of the soul are called the dharma, the real dharma of the soul. And ironically, in this material world, we have to also take care of the body, because the soul is kind of somehow trapped in this body. So we have to take care of that as well. So there is a great balancing act. Normally, we just kind of tilt on the side of body and completely ignore the soul. And then we have the situation of like a cage, a bird in a cage, and then we just take care of the cage and forget about the bird.
I was also thinking that most of the times, our world, our society, most of the times it veers towards just taking care of the dharma of our body. And when we say the body, it means body and extended self, right? So body, family, society, country, so on and so forth. And then the other, and then we completely neglect the dharma of the essential self. But sometimes the other way around is also possible, that we are only concerned about taking care of the dharma of the essential self, and we think that the body is like a unnecessary burden that we are carrying, and we completely neglect that. So in both cases, there is chaos. If we just work on if we just try to take care of dharma to the body, then also what will be the effect? Let's ask you guys this question. Then what do you think will happen if you're only concerned with taking care of the dharma that is pertaining to the body? Yes, Manjari.
So I think Obviously, the mind and the soul needs nourishment. We need grace. I mean, body is just an external thing. So yes, it's important to stay healthy and fit, but we have to attend to the soul, the dharma to the soul, which means whether it's reading scriptures or meditating or praying and all of that. So it's very important. I mean, it's you're very incomplete with just but attending to the.
Very nice. In fact, we can go even as far as to say that by taking care of what one dharma should support the other dharma, right? So our execution of spiritual dharma should support our execution of the material dharma, and the execution of our material dharma should in turn support the execution of our spiritual dharma. That's the very synergistic relationship. So thank you, man. Anybody else?
Yes, I feel that if we only cater to the body, I mean, we ignore the soul, ethically we get imbalanced, because we may do things that are only, helping our body, but not our soul, because all of us have a sense of good and bad. So we could, if we concentrate totally on the body, our worldview could be imbalanced, and we would only cater to the needs of the body. So it
Very
also
nice.
affects, our sense of right and wrong.
Well, how is it manifesting? Very right, Jyoti. That's a very nice point. So can you guys see, how is it manifesting in today's world?
I was going to ask exactly the same question. Let's unpack that. What would happen? Like, say, let's just take a scenario. Let's say I've really worked very hard and I've become a very powerful business person or a great writer or a great movie maker, whatever. And in turn, I have not taken care of the dharma of my essential self. Then how would that affect the execution of my material dharma? Yes, Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like when I lean in towards the material stuff too much, I get like very self-centered. I get very kind of greedy and just kind of obsessed with, taking care of myself, disconnected from other people and other spiritual components.
Exactly. It's what will happen.
Yeah, you pointed at self-centered, and as we can see in all parts of the world, and especially in America now, how many shootings are happening every day. I mean, it's shocking that on average, 2 mass shootings are happening every day.
Yes.
And they are happening in all kind of places. And this is kind of a result of a void, a spiritual void, when people are not feeling satisfied and happy. And as a result, they are doing crazy things.
Also, what happens is that we become super attached and overly anxious. I remember there's this famous celebrity in India, and he every Sunday or Saturday, whatever, he comes out onto his balcony, and people are watching him, and they asked him, he said, "What is your greatest fear?" And he said, "My greatest fear is that one day I will step on that balcony and there'll be no one there." So that excessive attachment that we have, when our dharma is lopsided, we are constantly in a state of fear and constantly in a state of unrest. So balancing that with spiritual dharma frees us to be able to execute our material dharma in the most, it's a life of freedom. So we should continue. And can we just quickly just also talk about what if we simply focus on spiritual dharma and neglect the material dharma? Maybe we can just say it. Because that also can create a chaos, right? And that chaos also we are fully aware of. People prematurely giving up their, husbands giving up their wives, wives giving up their husbands, children being neglected, artificial renunciation, parents being neglected. I mean, so many cases where people have artificially done that, and then that also does not really work out in the long run. So the whole process of the art of work is to learn this balance of material and spiritual dharma.
Yeah, we lose our sense of responsibility.
Yes.
I mean, it's a form of escapism, going into spirituality. Yes. And we forget about all our responsibilities towards the family, towards the society, towards our country.
Exactly.
So we do owe, things to people
Yes.
around, and we forget all that. We become
Yeah.
completely imbalanced, and the
Imbalance.
body also needs nourishment.
Yes.
So we have to look after our body too.
Yes.
It deserves some amount of care on a daily basis, like from the point of view of hygiene, we keep ourselves healthy, clean, and we have good thoughts. All this can happen only if our body is clean.
Exactly.
That's
And
what
this is how spiritual, yes, and that's exactly how spiritual dharma can support our material dharma. Because in fact, people who just work, that actually sometimes they neglect their bodies. But if you have a spiritual conception, you can actually hopefully take better care of your body with the right amount of, nutrition.
Because
So
now
I-
the body has a higher purpose, right? Until now, if you're just working or just kind of get more and more, then we don't really have a higher purpose for the body, and we misuse the body. You see people who do that, they end up misusing the body because they don't see a higher purpose for the body. But for a spiritual person, there is a higher purpose for the body, to use the body to the fullest advantage so that we can become fully spiritual. And then the body becomes like a great friend. Otherwise, the body, sooner or later, it becomes a great burden.
So we can continue now.
So we can see that Arjuna has that imbalance in the beginning. He's not able to find that balance. And that's where the whole Bhagavad Gita starts.
We can skip this. I mean, basically,
Yeah, she's talking about finding the calling.
this is beautiful. This is absolutely beautiful. This is by Martin Luther King Jr. And he's saying, if a man is called to be a street sweeper, he should sweep streets, even as Michelangelo painted, or Beethoven composed music, or Shakespeare wrote poetry. He should sweep streets so well that all the host of heaven and earth will pause to say, here lived a great street sweeper who did his job well. So this is essentially the art of doing work as a form of yoga, that even if you have to wash dishes, like I can speak for myself, that I was never fond of washing dishes. But when you connect that to a higher purpose, then that same chore, which can seem very mundane and repetitive, somehow acquires a deeper sense, a deeper purpose, and we are able to perform that act with love in our heart. So material dharma, when it is accompanied with spiritual understanding, a strong spiritual foundation, does a few things. The first thing it does, it gives us a reason or a purpose to wake up in the morning and actually perform the most repetitive and the most boring work. The second thing it does is that it gives us a way to perform that work which is not self-centered. Rather, it is selfless and it is non-transactional. And the third thing it does, which is the most amazing thing, is that the person for whom that work is offered, like we want to serve our family, we want to serve our husbands, wives, children, they actually derive the greatest benefit because now we have become a touchstone because our consciousness is connected.
That's a great point, because working in spiritual consciousness actually benefits everybody. It's like when we water the root of a great tree, then its fruits are enjoyed by the whole society, not just the tree itself. The tree hardly enjoys the fruits. Everybody else enjoys.
Yeah.
So this is about authentic life. And authenticity comes from really understanding who we truly are. Because if our authenticity is based on just the body and the mind, which are temporary, then we are temporarily authentic. But when our sense of authenticity is based on the soul, which is permanent, then we are truly being authentic. And then that spills over into everything that we do. And it is satisfying. Anything that is not authentic is not satisfying. The soul is fixed. It's not changing. Whereas the mind and body, they are continuously changing. The mind is continuously changing about its conception of who it is, what it wants. Today it wants this, tomorrow it wants that. So it's very hard to be authentic with our mind. Mind continuously tosses us around. But when we are authentic on the foundation of the soul, then we have something, we are rock solid. And that is being perceived by everybody else as well. And this is why Krishna, so this is, the first part was of work, working according to dharma, which means finding that balance, finding our true self, and merging that into our work. Second is working with detachment.
I think this is such an important point because one of our greatest challenges in work is our excessive attachment to the work itself and then to the results of the work. And that causes so much stress. So here Krishna is actually, stating a principle that is so freeing, which is you have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you're not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities and never be attached to not doing your duty. So both things, that if I'm not going to get the results, then somebody might say, why should I do my work? So Krishna is saying, no, you must do your work, but don't be attached. Well, somebody could say, like, how would that help me? What would it look like if, say, I was not attached to the result of my work? Is that even a practical thing? Well, it turns out that it is. I think, isn't the next slide about the flow theory?
Yeah, I think that's coming up soon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this detachment, and you, if you guys like to share, is there a situation in your life where you have been a little bit detached, or just detached, not just for the spiritual reasons, but you have been detached from the work, and
Or
what
you've
have
been
you,
super attached. Or you've been super attached.
or you've been super attached? What have you seen? Maybe let's just explore that a little bit, just to hear directly from you guys. What's your experience?
So when you're like if you go off in your own zone, and if you like, I've experienced that when my children are in the US and if they are not calling me, and sometimes even I feel very unattached, and for days and maybe I may not call them, but then they feel like, oh, mom, we're busy, but you haven't called us. So I think a little bit of attachment is good, because it keeps the relationships nourished and going. If everybody stops caring, then there'll be nothing left of a family. But there are, on the contrary, if there are times when I felt over attached to my husband, then it's led to like, he doesn't feel like he has the space, because he feels like, that I'm all the time asking him or wanting to be with him. So, there's a fine line where you have to be attached where to the extent of fulfilling your duties and making others feel like you care for them and look after them, but yet not being needy of them.
Yes.
Not, yeah, not like wanting your own benefit for your own needs.
It's a very good point, actually, because that sort of happy balance, that loving detachment. I think that the word for that is loving detachment, where there is love, but it is not smothering our work. It's not smothering the relationship. And there's also the space of healthy detachment. And that's how our relationships can also be very sacred, and they can really function well. Because when we are overly attached to the fruits, even in a relationship, what is the fruit of a relationship? It is that this person is going to behave exactly as I want him to behave, or I want him to give me love in the way that I want to receive love. So when there is this mood of like, I'm just going to offer something without expecting anything in return, then I'm free. And then actually what I'm looking for will flow into my life easily. Yes, Jyoti.
Yeah, I feel that there is, a conscious effort to be detached. I mean, especially in the life of a teacher, because she has to treat all the students equally. And especially during correction time, I would try not even to look at the name, of the person on the answer scripts, but of course, I could recognize their handwriting. So then what I did was I would put down the points that I expect for each thing. And if I find the points given to me in a reasonable manner, I give the marks, I award the marks. So this was a very, very important thing for me as a teacher. I mean, I had to practice it, because otherwise I would be accused of partiality. And you know how the students are, when they get less marks, bang, they accuse you of that. So I had to very consciously practice it. And not that I had any favorites in class, because always I would view them very objectively, with affection, yes, but terribly objectively. And to date, I have stuck to that practice. So
Very
I
nice.
feel, I really feel I should give myself a pat there.
That's wonderful, Jyoti. Thank you. You are an excellent teacher. And that is true that, when we can become free from, the whatever it is that we're looking for, then we can perform our work with actually genuine love and detachment. Very nice. So should we continue?
Yeah.
Hey, Sam, go ahead. Sam, go ahead. I thought I saw you unmute if you want to say something. Okay. All right. So maybe we can continue.
Yeah, this similar concept is presented by this professor. I can't even pronounce his name. You guys can try.
What is it? Mihaly something.
Csikszentmihalyi.
It's a difficult name, but this is so interesting because this is what Krishna is saying in the Bhagavad Gita, right? That you do your work, but don't be attached to the results. And this guy has done a research and he has shown that when people actually can completely let go of any expectation, and I've seen that when I'm writing something and when I'm not overly concerned about the outcome, then I'm able to actually really write well or do anything well. But when I'm overly attached, like, oh, it needs to be this way, and I need to be able to produce this, then actually that becomes like a block to my creativity. So let's watch this. I think this is an interesting video.
It feels effortless even though you're facing an extreme challenge. There's a sense of relaxation, but it's also intense. You seem more present than ever, but you also seem to lose your entire sense of self. You've probably experienced this before, when you were so engaged in a task that you lost track of time and place. There's a term for this. It's called being in a state of flow. And if we want students to be fully empowered to own the creative.
Yes, anyways, there's a whole long video. Something similar to Krishna wants Arjuna to be in this state of flow and a flow of yoga, basically. When he's connected in that purpose and consciousness with Krishna, then a person is more creative, a person is more courageous, and a person is more caring. All these things happen when we are in that state of flow.
Actually, it's very interesting, and I'm sure Jyoti would know this, being a teacher of literature, that there are so many great writers and great poets and even great musicians like Beethoven and all, who have actually said that their greatest, work of creativity has happened to them in this kind of state of almost when they just somehow felt connected, and when they felt that that whole piece, whether it was a written piece or a piece of music, it just flowed from them, through them, rather than just operating from the conscious self, but it came from a much deeper place. So when we actually use our work as an act of as a form of yoga, as a way of connecting, then we are connected to supreme intelligence. And by connecting ourselves with that supreme intelligence and staying in that zone and then not being attached to the results, we can actually channel that intelligence through us. And we can do it as an act of offering, which is very satisfying for ourselves. And we can actually really realize our fullest potential by doing that.
It's like being a car in a train, right? Each of the cars, they can be either attached to the engine or they can be on their own. So when we are detached from all the external results or our external fears and anxieties, and we are able to connect to the real supreme intelligence, which is the engine, then we can actually travel long distance. Otherwise, we can just go only so far.
It feels effortless.
And so there's a very unique concept, novel concept that is presented in our Vedas. It is called Yukta Vairagya. So the word Yukta in Sanskrit means connected, being in yoga, and Vairagya means being detached. So how can I be connected and detached at the same time? And this conundrum is solved here in this concept that when we are able to, when we are connected with the supreme intelligence, and yet we are not seeking any specific results for ourselves or with a selfish interest. And then when we do it with that purpose, then everything that is in this world can be utilized for this higher cause, rather than being our impact is far more pervasive when we are able to do that. But whereas when we are just kind of focused on our own self-interest and don't really care about anything else, then the output or the result that we can produce is very limited. So let's look at these two principles. It says, Anasaktasya Vishayan Yatharam Upayunjita Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yuktam Vairagyam Uchyate. When one is not attached to anything, but at the same time accepts everything in relationship to Krishna Supreme, one is rightly situated above possessiveness. And the next principle is, on the other hand, one who rejects everything without knowledge of its relationship to Krishna is not as complete in his renunciation. So just talking about improper renunciation, which is, okay, I have nothing to do with this world. And I'm just going to focus on whatever, my spirituality or my, it's all about me. Then that renunciation is incomplete, and it leads to hard-heartedness and incomplete realization, actually. And whereas this higher principle of using everything, and so that includes our work. How can I use my work in this in the spirit of yoga? How can I use the results of my work in the spirit of yoga? Then every situation in our life, good, bad, or ugly, can be utilized in this evolution of our own consciousness. So rather than rejecting or becoming too attached to a particular situation or position or people, we can be in this flow zone where we are attached to the Supreme, yet we are detached from everything else. And that is a zone where we can actually give the maximum to ourselves and others. Anything else you want to say on this?
No, let's continue. Let's continue.
We break up the word yukta. Why is it called yukta viragya? Where you are basically not being possessive, but you're not being possessive, and you're seeing the connectedness in all material things with Krishna.
Yes. Yukta means connection. So connected detachment or detailed detachment. It's not giving up. So now we'll talk about this. Let's get to the next slide. I think it'll become a lot clearer. So in this example, suppose there's a wallet that is lying on the ground. So there could be three responses to a person who's walking by the wallet. The first person can take when he sees the wallet, he can take a look at it and he go, oh my God, a wallet filled with money. This is meant for me. And he comes and he grabs it and he just, decides to use it for his own enjoyment. So that's kind of what most people in this world, right? They look at all natural resources and they think that I'm the master of all I survey and it's all meant for me, me, me. So that's one approach to, to what we see around and how we engage with things around. The second could be that I come here, I look at the wallet and I go, oh my God, this is all material. This is all Maya. This is a grand illusion. I have nothing to do with it. So I'm just going to just look away and just walk away from it. So that would be a second approach that I could have with work, which is kind of this immature, unreal renunciation that I'm not going to engage with the world. And just like Jyoti was saying, it's a form of escapism, right? I'm just going to reject everything. Then the third person might come along and he may take a look at this wallet and he may say, oh, there is a wallet lying on the ground. It surely doesn't belong to me, but it must belong to someone. So let me open the wallet and let me see if there's an address of the person to whom this belongs. And let me take this wallet and give it back to the person who is the rightful owner. So this third approach of taking whatever we have and reuniting it or connecting it or offering it back to the original owner is actually called yoga. And,
so here,
and that is
and that is the perfect example of yukta vairagya. The person is seeing this wallet in relationship to its rightful owner.
So I hope that helps, Manjari. So that is what is yukta vairagya. Is taking things, connecting it back. It doesn't belong. Who does this house belong to? Like I remember, we used to have a house in Lakelands in Gaithersburg. For the longest time, we used to say, oh, this is our address. This is our address. We moved away. Someone else now has that house, right? So, things are always shifting. Money is shifting from one hand to the other. So who does it all belong to ultimately? And that's the, the source of everything. And so we want to offer it back, connect it back.
Thanks, God.
Yes, thank you. Let's continue.
Same example is given of a bank teller. I just like watching them counting money like this so fast.
But the reason why this video is so relevant is because this teller is counting money all day long but he has no sense of proprietorship. Wouldn't you guys agree that one of the greatest reasons why we struggle in our relationships is because of this sense of possessiveness and the sense of proprietorship? It's the cause of our greatest angst in life. And so, how would our lives look different if we were completely loving and completely present, but without having a personal stake in any of that? What do you guys think about that? What do you think your lives would, how different would it look like? You say, Jyoti, you could write book after book without any angst of what happens to it, right? Or, or as a mother, like we could just raise our children and just never have any, just be completely in a place where we can just freely love without expecting anything. How would that affect us or impact us?
It'll be really so wonderful if we could detach to that extent. Honestly, it would be heavenly.
Yes, that is the true path of total happiness. And the good news is that it is possible. That is possible for sure. Yes, Manjari or anyone else, Matt. I know Matt has this beautiful smile on his face. So
Yeah, no, I think Giotti, I don't know how to say her name,
yes,
but
yeah.
yeah, I believe, it would just be this very free feeling, very light feeling, very happy feeling.
Yeah. It's how we are meant to live, right? And it's how we are meant to love. It's how we are meant to work, actually. Yes. Manjari, did you want to say something? No. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so much of our stress, our everyday stress, is because of these anxieties and these things that we carry. Here, go ahead.
Yeah, and this is what, when we are detached, we are actually able to differentiate between short-term and long-term. In Sanskrit, they are called Shreyas versus Preyas. So Preyas means just short-term, or what's in it for me right now, and I don't think about others or the universe or the source. Where Shreyas means that I'm detached, I am looking at things from a more balanced perspective. I am also connected with the Supreme, and I have a broader self-interest. Let's call it broader self-interest, and that's what happens. Our happiness actually, in the short term, it may feel like more difficult, but when we have that broader outlook towards work, towards life, then our overall long-term happiness actually increases, and it actually keeps on increasing. Whereas with this short-term mindset, in the short term, we may get some high happiness, like a spike, like when you get an energy drink, you get a spike, but then it comes down also crashing. So they found that, you go ahead and explain this.
I guess there was a study, it's called the hedonistic curve, right? Where it said that a person, if he say gets a lottery for $1 million versus another person who gets his legs amputated. Now, one would think that the person who got a lottery is obviously going to be, so much happier. And he's always going to, he's really made it. And, the person who got his leg amputated is obviously not going to be happy. But they found that in 6 months' time, the happiness level of both the people are actually identical. So this is a very interesting study because it shows that material happiness actually has a set point. And material distress also has a set point. So when we tap into this deeper place of happiness in our lives, then we are not affected by the ups and downs. Like I remember when I was in college, or even school for that matter, I used to feel like I was on a Ferris wheel. Like some days would be high, some days would be low, and you're always going up and down in your emotional roller coaster. But when you're actually acting on the spiritual plane and acting for the long-term benefit of our essential self, then our happiness index is actually stable, and it'll keep increasing no matter whether we win a lottery or or something terrible happens to us. And that is actually why when we work in that consciousness, then work actually becomes a source of great happiness and joy for us, and it doesn't bind us.
So the third principle that Krishna suggests is in our work is sacrifice, the importance of sacrifice. The Sanskrit word is called yajna. Yajna means sacrificing. It could be sacrificing our resources. It could be sacrificing our time. It could be sacrificing our attention. But the essential principle of yajna is that recognizing that there is a source from which everything comes, including me. And when I'm receiving so much, then in a spirit of gratitude, I want to offer something back in love. And you can call it sacrifice or giving back, but this is something that actually lifts us up when we are, and you probably have experienced that whenever we give back something out of love and gratitude, then we feel so much more satisfied and complete. So this is, and it's also purifying. Krishna says that sacrifice purifies us by removing false ego, the false sense of self-proprietorship, because we receive so much and we think this is mine, mine, mine. When we don't give back to the Supreme or to the world, then and that things that actually we think that we possess them, they actually start possessing us. And the second principle is that to the extent that one engages in sacrifice, to that extent he can perceive transcendence. So it's an essential principle in every aspect of our life, is to engage in yajna. The goal is to go higher and higher in transcendence, and without sacrificing, without engaging in that, we'll be kind of stuck in this material realm.
Actually, yajna, sometimes you think, oh, yajna means, just a fire sacrifice, but yajna literally means that something that is done with love for the satisfaction of the Supreme Divine. And that is the highest form of motivation. In fact, there has been a study that shows that love is actually the highest motivator for work. So when we have that love within our heart, that we can actually offer this work and feel completely fulfilled. So that's what we want to connect with. And that's the meaning of the word akarma. I think the way we got into this discussion was because we talked about karma. And if you remember, we talked about how akarma is the kind of work that can completely nullify all our past karmic baggage, which we are carrying from lifetime through lifetime. So this akarma is actually this work, which is done as an act of sacrifice for the Supreme Lord, Vishnu. And when we do it in this way, this is a verse from the Bhagavad Gita, then one will always remain free from all bondage. Bondage of the mind, bondage of the heart, bondage of the reactions, bondage of others. In all ways, one will actually attain complete freedom.
So what is the work that qualifies as a karma? It's basically done without attachment to the fruits and without any. Is that a karma?
Not just that without any attachment, but it's rather stating the positive. It's saying, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction, for Lord Vishnu's satisfaction. So that has to be at the forefront of whatever we do, the motivation behind doing the work. And then we'll talk into practical steps of how to implement that in our day-to-day life. That has to be a primary motivation. Otherwise, what happens is bondage is caused in our consciousness. Bondage is not like somebody is physically holding us up. It's a bondage of our consciousness. And that consciousness is already so caught up in this material world in so many different ways that we don't even realize it. We think that is normal, that is who we are.
And also the fruits that we will get from work that is not done in that consciousness will cause us a lot of distress. That is the most primary thing, because when work is performed for one's self gratification or self enjoyment, then that even though one will accumulate money or one will accumulate resources, then what will happen is that eventually over generations also, and also in one's own lifetime, that fruit we will not be able to digest that fruit. And that fruit will ultimately cause us toxicity. And we see that, you see very successful people with lots of money, lots of fame, lots of this, lots of that, but they're not able to actually, all of those fruits, that doesn't nourish them in the long run. So on the other hand, when that work is done, not for oneself, but for the Supreme, source, then that work actually frees us. And even the fruits, it's not that we won't get the fruits. The fruits will be ours, but that fruit will not come. It will come as an act of as mercy. That will be spiritual fruits, and it'll actually, cause real prosperity.
And Another question, sorry to interrupt you. That any particular reason why he's referring to Arjuna as O son of Kunti, or is it just out of affection or something?
I don't know, Lokadaksha can answer that.
Artham karma kaunte.
Yeah, he uses different names for Arjuna in different places. And this particular situation, I don't know why he's calling him son of
All
Kunti.
right.
Yeah.
All right. So
Let's continue.
So this is the few principles that we can learn from Bhagavad Gita, how to transform our work into worship. So we talked about this concept of akarma, how to work for satisfaction of Vishnu or Krishna, how to bring that into practically our life. So say we have so many different kind of work. Our work that earns us money, that is our job. It could be work in relationship to our family. It could be work in relationship to our social obligations. There's so many things that we have to do to survive in this material world. So these principles can be applied in all different aspects of our life. Even if you apply a little bit, there are six things that are mentioned here. One is intention, righteous, results, remembrance, remaining time, pleasure of the Supreme. So we'll discuss all of these. And you'll see even a little bit. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, even if you do a little bit, it will save you in the greatest moment of danger.
Let's start with.
Oh, I think this is like the.
Oh, we're just going to talk. Okay.
So let's talk about it.
Yeah, so let's just talk about it. So first thing, it's not just enough that I just say, oh yes, I'm just doing it for, like this is not for me, I'm just doing it for God. One has to be very authentic and one has to be very real and one has to set an intention. And one of the ways that we set this intention, and one of the things actually we wanted to talk to you also, is to start the day. When you start the day, like for example, if you want to make yogurt, you take a big pot of milk, right? And then what do? You heat it up and then you put a tiny little bit of starter. So when you put a little bit of starter in that milk, then you leave it for a few hours. What happens? It turns into yogurt, right? So same way, when you start the day with a little bit of spiritual vibration or some kind of spiritual sadhana, then what happens is that the rest of the day when we are working, our work will actually become karma yoga. It'll become something completely spiritual, and you will be able to see it for yourself. Your engagement with that work will be very different than how we normally approach our work. So that's the first thing. So set an intention and do the work in that mood that I'm doing this work not for myself, but it is my offering of love for the Supreme. And
yeah, that intention is just like when we do something for a loved one. Say if you're going to buy clothes for your child, before you go out into the market, you start meditating on that, what kind of clothes and how the child will look in them, and you start you start feeling happy about it, right? So the intention is meditation, doing the work in that spirit, for whose pleasure I'm doing it, and intentionally trying to think that I'm doing it for the Supreme's pleasure. And the second principle is righteous. Of course, the work has to be righteous. We may have all the good intention. It says the path to the hell is paved with good intentions. So something like that. The work has to be righteous. It can't be just anything randomly that we do. It is something that when we do it in a righteous spirit and in a righteous work, then the work will actually turn into worship.
The third is results. So whatever results we get, we should, again, same thing, we should offer it, and we should not think that these results belong to me. We should understand very clearly that these results have come as a result of yes, my work, but also there is a divine providence, and I should use those results for the satisfaction of the Supreme and also for the welfare of all. So whoever we are, whatever we can help. So our work should be connected to a higher purpose. Next one is.
So practically speaking, say we get some certain amount of money for our work. So consciously, Bhagavad Gita also says that if the results are not used for the pleasure of the Supreme, then those results, they become, the classic example that is given is that, say if you have a boat and if you're trying to sail across the river, and what if you had a hole in the boat, and the boat gets filled up with water? What will happen? The boat will sink. So when the results are not used for the satisfaction of the Supreme, then what happens? It is our life situation is like a boat that is filled with water. All that money that we are accumulating, that becomes like the water in the boat, and it is surely going to sink the boat. So it's better to use the at least a part of the results that we get. It's very hard to part with money, because money is honey. And so consciously planning to use a part of our results for the satisfaction of the Supreme. And there are practical ways that we can discuss. But when we do that, then actually we become free. We are taking out the water from the boat and making the boat afloat again.
And this is the most important, which is remembrance. Who are we remembering? Like, the classic example would be someone sitting in a cubicle, and, they have a, in their cubicle, they have a picture of their dog, and they have a picture of their wife, and they have a picture of their kid. So they're working all day, but in their heart, they're thinking that I'm going to go back home and I'm going to be with my family, right? So along with that picture, we also, when we work in that mood, like a very beautiful example is that of a wife who is in love with a paramour. And so she's working all day, really, really hard. But in her heart, she's thinking, oh, I'm going to do my work really well so that no one can suspect that, that I actually in the evening, I'm going to go meet with my paramour. So even while she's doing that work, her heart is still completely attached, and she's constantly remembering and thinking of her beloved. So in the same way, when we do our work in that consciousness that I'm doing what I need to do, but my heart is actually remembering the Supreme Paramour, and in that way, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, I think it's developing that spirit when we are, who am I thinking of when doing the work? So far we have talked about like before the work starts, that is intention. So before the work, now this is during the work, I'm thinking of the Supreme. Results is at the end of the work, what do I get? What do I do with them? So before, during, and after, we consciously inject this higher concept of yoga into our work, which is connecting with the Supreme. Before the work starts, I'm connecting with the Supreme. We can make a prayer, we can make an intention that I'm doing this work for you, I'm offering this work for you, please give me the intelligence so I can actually offer it to you from my heart. I'm not doing it for myself. While doing it, we consciously try to remember the Supreme. Could be any work. It could be teaching. It could, for Arjuna, it was fighting. Any line of work. We can definitely bring out the remembrance rather than just trying to remember, oh, how much money I'm going to get and how I'm going to enjoy it. Of course, we'll do a little bit of that, definitely. But also trying to bring this into our remembrance of the Supreme while we're doing the work. And
let's just finish it off by talking about these last two remaining time. So go ahead. Why don't you speak on that?
Yeah, remaining time is basically we plan our day, we plan our life in such a way that we have time remaining to use our time to meditate, use our time to connect with the Supreme, because time is precious. If you don't plan for it, then something else will fill that gap. Either Netflix or some phone calls or this and that. We talked about those 4 quadrants in our first session, and not so important, not urgent, those things will basically fill up our day. So carving out time, organizing our work in such a way that it gives us time. If it doesn't give me time to take care of my spiritual needs, then there needs to be made some adjustment.
And I can tell you one thing. I can tell you one thing, that Loka is actually quite a master at that. I mean, I've seen him working for the last 27 years, and the way he has always organized his work in such a way that he's always been able to have sufficient amount of time for spiritual cultivation and also sufficient amount of time for the family. So that work-life balance that we talk about, I think it's a very, very significant point that is also very applicable in our own spiritual, in our own, in our practice of spirituality, that making sure that our day is organized in such a way that we do have some time. we allocate certain time. If we don't allocate that time, then there is a way in which life has a way of just, time just goes by, right? So when we make a conscious effort and we say, okay, I'm going to dedicate so much, time in my day for my spiritual cultivation, then we are taking care of the dharma of our essential self. And on that note, actually, last time also, I think many of you expressed a desire to have a daily, session where you can kind of connect. So we are thinking very seriously on those lines, and we have some ideas, so we can talk about that at the very end. And then finally, the last one is the pleasure of the supreme, which I think we already talked about, that our work has to give pleasure. One of the greatest challenges we face with our work is like, oh my God, I do so much for everyone and no one is happy with me. Right, my work is not giving pleasure to my family members, or they don't appreciate it enough. So when we do our work as an for the pleasure of the supreme, then we free ourselves from these expectations, and we are always fulfilled, and we experience a great deal of satisfaction. And then it doesn't matter who's acknowledging us, who's not acknowledging us, whether our boss thinks we are great, whether he doesn't think we are great, whether the editor thinks we are great or not. So we become free from this this kind of captivity of people's pleasure or lack of pleasure.
And when the Supreme is pleased, you will see the pleasure of the Supreme will be reflected in your heart, because the Supreme is seated within our own heart. And when he's pleased, you will feel just like when there is an earthquake deep within the earth, like even 30-50 miles within the earth, that comes out as tremors on the ground, right? And then so many buildings are broken, people die, or there is a tsunami on the shores. But it's like deep within the earth, something has happened. So similarly, when the pleasure who's deep within us, when the Supreme who's deep within us is pleased, you will see the pleasure reflected in your own heart. And that happiness and pleasure cannot be measured to anything that we can materially acquire or achieve in this life. So
I think we can end here. Forget about that video. Maybe we can just share it later.
Okay. Yeah,
this is how you can watch this. So you falls into a bowl of milk, and then gradually that the cream turns into butter. So that's what the yoga work is. That it's turning that cream into butter by our intention, by our consciousness, and by doing that, actually we can become truly satisfied. And in fact, not just become satisfied ourselves, but that work can actually become a very powerful instrument of positive change in the world as well. So I think we can stop.
That work actually becomes our spirituality.
Yeah.
We remove the difference between work and spirituality.
Yeah.
Right.
So I guess we want to hear from you guys and see if you guys have any comments or thoughts or questions.
So somebody who hasn't spoken yet, like SR,
Usha,
Geeta.
And also those of you who have spoken. Yes. Please, we don't forget. Yes.
Yeah, today's session was really nice. We talked about not detaching from the world totally on the spiritual path, because that is not practical. Also, as long as we are living on the earth, we are part of earth and we are part of real life. And we have to strike a balance between worldly life and the spiritual life, and also karma that you do for the satisfaction of the ultimate versus your own satisfaction. And when you do that, the results are automatically going to be amazing, and you'll be a lot more peaceful.
Very nice. Very nice summarization. Actually, what happens is when we do work as a satisfaction for the Supreme, we become an instrument. Right. We become a divine instrument. And then suppose, like, for example, you know, in India, you've seen that you have these little bicycles, and they somehow, they somehow manage to hold on to a truck. So the bicycle has the capacity to maybe move at, I don't know, what's the speed of a bicycle? 5 miles an hour?
Yeah, at the most.
At the most. And the truck has the ability to, travel at what? 30, 40 miles an hour, whatever, however. So now you're plugging into the speed of the truck. So same way, when we plug into the Supreme Intelligence, then our capacity and our potential for work just expands beyond what is the limited human capacity.
There's a classic story from the Bhagavad Purana You guys will love it. This 5-year-old boy, Dhruva, who went to the forest to meditate on the Vishnu, and he wanted certain results. So he started meditating. And at one point, he was able to actually hold his breath. He would not breathe throughout the day. He would only take a few breaths after every 3 days. That much control he developed. So when he would stop, and then there came a point, he was so connected to the Supreme, the Super Soul within his heart, that when he stopped his breathing, actually the whole universe ran out of breath, because the whole universe actually stopped breathing. He developed, the point is that his impact, the impact of one person making a positive spiritual change in life was felt throughout the whole universe. So this is the power of engaging and connecting. You'll feel the satisfaction, and your satisfaction will be felt by everybody around you. You will become an instrument of that satisfaction, like a water fountain.
You'll be like a live wire.
Yeah, live wire.
Yeah, my son is in medicine, and he works in a hospital that's in an underprivileged area. Detroit, you are familiar with. So proper Detroit is where his hospital is. And
that's like a war zone.
Yeah. And, doing medicine is one thing, but then dealing with, families who are homeless and who do not have resources to take care of themselves, or who are not willing to take care of themselves. And that process, along with the system, can get quite frustrating sometimes. So I try to kind of help him understand that you are basically extension, to God's hands. Whatever God wants, for that person, God is trying to do it through you. So if you can try to remember that as a human, you would still have frustrations here and there. But as much as you are able to remember that, that can help you deal with that frustration here and there.
That is beautiful, Usha. Thank you so much. That's very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, your son is like Arjuna in that battlefield.
I'll tell him that.
Instead of shooting arrows, he's shooting medicines and treatment.
Hey, Jyoti, go ahead. I know you wanted to say something.
No, I was listening with a lot of interest to Usha. Hats off to her son. I mean, working in that kind of, environment. So I was just thinking of that. So not that I have anything to say in particular, because I'm just absorbing everything that everyone is saying right now.
Thank you, Jyoti.
Making a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, it's really amazing. Actually, it really transforms everything. And, we want to make an impact. We have such a desire to do some service for our family. We have a desire to do something for our society. And unless and until we are empowered, how are we going to do anything? And this empowerment happens when we are plugged in, when we are connected, then the fan will work. Otherwise, how will the fan work? So this whole process of yoga of work is really a process of first connecting ourselves. Then we can help everyone around us. Yes, anybody else? Manjari?
Almost like conduits of, we are conduits, like.
Yeah.
Krishna said in Bhagavad Gita, Nimitta Matram Bhava Sabyasachi. He said in the 11th chapter that you become a nimitta. Nimitta means a conduit, an instrument of my plan.
Okay.
And actually, when we are not a conduit, we do great harm. Right? But when we become a conduit, that's the only time we can actually be of some use. Just like, if we think of a little bolt, like a nut, a little, bolt or a nut, if it's disconnected from the machine, it's lying on the ground, it's just a piece of metal scrap. Some kabadi wala is going to come and take it and just, what is the value of that little nut? But when it's connected to the big machine, then it is of significant value. So same thing when we are just trying to, be a little nut, just disconnected and just fallen off from the machine, then what can we do for anyone? But connected back to the machine, then hey,
Yeah, the most we can do is somebody steps on that nut and then their foot gets injured, right? We become a pain in the neck. And thinking of the conduit, I was thinking like an artery, being an artery which is free of any blockages is the best thing for the heart. And when we are not connected, and there's a blockage in the artery, then what does it cause? It causes a heart attack. So when we have a blockage of our desires, that blockage is like the cholesterol of our desires, our own self ambitions and this and that, we become like a clogged artery. And all we do is cause a heart attack around us and to ourselves.
And to others.
Yeah.
That's a very good comparison.
If,
That's
Yeah.
a very good
uh,
comparison.
if
from
there's time, I
Mr.
would like
Loka.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. This is the first time I've
Yeah.
heard it. It was
I
an
loved
excellent. Yeah, it's very nice.
So true.
if there's time, I would like to share something about the remembrance experience.
Yeah.
So ever since I met both of you and I got into the regular practice of remembrance and chanting, like the days I don't chant in the morning, I feel like the whole day my autocorrect on my phone is not working. Everything after chanting, the autocorrect is right and everything goes correct. Nothing I say is wrong, nothing I say is offensive, everything, but otherwise sab gadbad hote jaye. Everything goes right. So
That's
I
good
think
thing to do.
my autocorrect feature.
Yeah, that is
Sometimes autocorrect can be dangerous too. If you don't pay attention what it corrected to.
I know sometimes it's quite.
But Krishna is the perfect autocorrect. He says, Yoga Kshema Mahamya, whatever you lack, I carry, whatever you have, I preserve. So that is like autocorrect.
Wonderful. Yeah. And I think both of us can attest to that, and that's actually one of the reasons. Okay, here is a good segue into this. So we were thinking, and we really want your feedback. We were thinking of starting like a daily, like in and out, like we keep it really, really tight. It could either be like a 20-minute or it could be a 30-minute where we come, we inject our consciousness with some spiritual vibration every day, followed by one round of chanting, the Maha Mantra, and we just make that a daily practice. So if you guys can let us know, like who's in India, it would be, I think we're thinking like 6 a.m. in the morning. If that's too early, let us know. But 6 a.m. And then for the US, that 6 a.m. would be 8:30 in the evening. So that would be for Usha.
I'm in.
You're
Absolutely.
in, I know you're in, and I know Manjari already spoke. Usha, is that a time that would work for you, like 8:30? Would you be interested, first of all? I don't want you to feel any pressure, but
Yeah. The meditation that we talked about, 15-20 minutes around 9 o'clock.
yeah.
That's certainly something I would be in for. The sessions, I'm not so sure because my work may run late a little bit sometimes in the evenings.
Okay.
and,
Okay. So you
I'm
can
a part of it.
just join for the meditation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you can let me know the segment time for meditation, I'll definitely be joining for that.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, okay. So we'll let you know when